Hey everybody, Randal Schwartz back again with my tips and tricks about Dart and Flutter. Today I'm going to talk about something that I've been working on for a little while. I had the idea to do this a year ago and didn't quite have the right technology, but I finally got it to work. So on your screen, if you're watching the video, you'll be seeing that I have a very simple layout of an app, and I'm running this in Chrome. I've got an app bar, I've got three columns, left and right, colored red just to get them out of the way. And then I have the important part of this demo today, which is that I'm going with a scrolling list, a list view here, that will eventually have a scroll bar. Doesn't need one yet because there's only 20 items in here so far. But notice this area down at the bottom that's green. And that is going to be a place for an indication that there are more items beyond the items you're seeing. A kind of a scroll to see more kind of deal. That's the name of today's episode, sort of primary thing. So there doesn't need to be one for only 20 items. If I try to scroll in here, nothing happens. But let me make the page a little smaller, which is why we're doing this on the web and not on a phone. And look, the moment we get some hidden items down here, we see scroll to see more. And that's sort of the gem of today's screencast, because I want to show how this is actually done. And notice it was also an animated fade in. I always like that as well, so you're not jarring the user. Now, of course, if I scroll here, see? So as long as there's items below the visible extent, they call it, then it's going to have that button. And the nice thing about this is that even if I've scrolled down a little bit, now as I drag this down, or if the other direction is what I wanted to show. If I scroll up, it still says, okay, scroll to see more. It does not say that right now because 20 items are visible. And if I drag down, notice it actually grows the area in the middle there. That's kind of nice. So that the list view automatically takes as much space as it can. And of course, once again, I can't scroll in here because I don't have any hidden items. So how did I achieve this? So there's a lot of little tidbits in today's screencast. So bear with me as I go through them all. I have it's a pretty basic thing. In fact, I deleted everything and started from scratch, so it might look a little different from the counter app, thank goodness. But I am using Flutter Hooks, and so if you grab this code from the gist, which I will link in the show notes, then you'll need to add Flutter pub add Flutter Hooks. So you need to type that at the command prompt. Or you can do it whatever way your UI does that. Okay, main is nothing more than a reference to my app. My app is a normal stateless widget. I'm using Dart 2.17, so I can use the new shortcut super constructor calls. So I edited this to be that. And now let's look at the build method for a material app. We've got a material app. We have a title, which shows up in the up here at the top of the app up here, Scroll Controller Demo. And we also have a title in the app bar, which also says Scroll Controller Demo. That's down here in the blue area. So that's that one. Okay, I've got the same thing twice. I probably should have made them separate. Now, in order to get this layout to react to size changes based on the fact that I can resize the window, and this would be for either desktop or web, might also be for various devices that might go from 1 to 2 screens and things like that. I've added a layout builder. And the layout builder simply will pass a context and the constraints for the current space available. So this is at the top level. minus the app bar, it will be the constraints minus the app bar, which is nice. And I'm printing those. As you can see, we've actually seen a few of them down here in the debug console. So you notice that it is a width and a height maximum for the constraints. And we're then passing those constraints down to the home screen. And this was really the only way I could find that would re-trigger a layout for when I change the actual size of the window. I don't quite understand it entirely, so I'm more like shaking a voodoo stick at it going, well, let me do this, and it works. Okay, so that's all there is to that. Home screen, on the other hand, is not a stateless widget, it is a hook widget, which is a stateless widget that permits hooks. So inside our build method, we are going to be able to add various state and other sorts of things, scroll controller and so on. We'll see that as we get down there. In fact, it's almost right here. But anyway, we define again our super key and our required box constraints being passed in. That's the value that's coming in from the layout builder. Now, down here in our build method, since we are a hook widget, we can do things like this. Create a scroll controller. And what I like about this is I don't have to declare a state and then declare an init state that sets up the scroll controller and then use the scroll controller down in the body of my code and then also in my dispose method dispose of that scroll controller. This is all built into this one operation. I then say that I want the size or the view of this particular widget to depend on the notifications that Scroller sends out. So that means I say use listenable, and now we have a relationship between the notifications that are coming out of the scroll controller and the rebuilding of the current widget. That's pretty handy. I then want a state for my button at the bottom, the one that says, not the button, sorry, just the display, that says either, yes, there's more information there or not. Now, the very first time I come through this for a build, use scroll controller will be a brand new scroll controller, and it will have no positions. Now, the positions on a scroll controller are where the scrolling has actually happened so far. Now, this is still happening in the code on the first build call before we've done any scrolling, so there are no positions. And if that's empty, we then are going to add a post-frame callback. Now, this is a little bit of a cheat, but it works fine here, and it's actually intended to work this way. What this means is after this entire screen has been painted once, we are going to then invoke the code that is contained within here. Now, the code within here, since it has painted the scroll controller, the scroll area, will now have a position. If it doesn't, this code will blow up, but I want it to blow up because it means something really weird happened. But here is the key, and this is sort of the bit of sand that got into the oyster to create the pearl. And I was describing to somebody about this thing called extentAfter, which is cleanly the scroll controller being able to tell me that I have anything visible or anything potentially visible after the end of the current scroll viewport. If this is greater than 0, then there's more to scroll, and we set more hidden to that value. So this is going to be either it's a Boolean, it's either true or false. If more hidden is false, that means that we were in that initial position where we just had the 20 items fully visible on the screen. If instead we are down further and can scroll, then this is going to be set to true. And again, for logging purposes, I print that and print all the positions that we have And again, down here, we can see some falses at the beginning of the line. There should be some trues further up. Boy, I tell you, there's a lot of scrolling going on there where I had that false. Okay, come on, there's going to be some true in here somewhere. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Scroll, 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 right? Anyway, take my word for it, there are some trues in there where there's more scrolling. In fact, actually, let me go ahead and let's scroll all the way to the bottom again, and we're going to move this up, and you'll see, yeah, see, now we see some trues over here, right? Because now this is going to be visible. Okay, so that state variable added by a use state, initially false, up here, is going to be controlling whether we're going to show that thing down below. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and just set up a container that represents the entire page. And just to make sure nothing was leaking through, I set the color to orange for the entire background of the screen. We then have a row that has 3 children. They're expanded. This is the red container on the left-hand side. I won't go through the details of this because you guys have all been doing this over and over again anyway. Here's my expanded center, and this is the one that's a little more interesting. I'm creating, once again, I'm doing a alignment center on that container. And we're going to set the color to green. This is actually the green that shows up at the bottom. So that's that green. So the green is actually, before I put in this list view, actually went from top to bottom here. Okay, so then we have our list view. We hand it the scroll controller that I created up at the build method top. And then we create a list of 20 items with item n+1 so that it's from 1 to 20. We set the font size so it's a little bit easier to read. And that's our list generate and our list view and our container and our expanded. So that is the list view part of it, the part that's in yellow, okay, because there's colors yellow. And then we have at the top, or at the very bottom of that green column, we're going to have an animated opacity that dissolves from one to the other in 200 milliseconds, 0.2 of a second. And we're using that more hidden value to decide whether to show it or hide it. Cool. Okay, and again, font size and text align center so that it shows up in the center of the text even when it's really narrow. And that is our entire column contents. So this was the key here, to be able to use more hidden value to decide whether or not to show that particular piece of the UI. And we have the right red column, not much more to see. So there you have it. Again, the key takeaways are up here, where on the first use of the scroller, it won't have any positions. So you'll need to do something like let the page paint once and then check if there's any extent after. Good, now you've got a good value to initialize that to. Otherwise, after the first time, when you actually have scroll positions, all you need to do is look at ScrollPosition.extentAfter to see if it is greater than 0. If it is, then there is more to be viewed. I hope you like this. Hope you see a couple of good things out of there that you didn't see otherwise, didn't know otherwise. Again, like this and subscribe to the channel, and I'll be back with more items. Thank you much.